everyone, and now we're actually going to talk about the Sixth Amendment, which is probably one of the biggest amendments and also one of the the least followed amendments. It is the right to due process, which includes so many things, and most of the things are just impossible to promise people, which is why it is the least followed amendment. Let's start from the beginning because we're going to talk about a lot. The Sixth Amendment is the right to due process, as I said before, and that includes the right to a lawyer, the right to know what you're being charged for, the right to a jury of unbiased peers, and to know the evidence that's being used against you. Now, that's a lot. Basically, it's what an average court case is supposed to look like. For example, a right to an attorney is, they have defense attorneys or civil lawyers or public defendants. That's what they mean when they say right to an attorney. It's basically like if I was arrested for something, we don't know if I did it or not, and I wouldn't have to pay for a lawyer. I just have one that the state or county provided me because I have the right to a lawyer in this instance. However, that doesn't apply when you're the person suing the other person, or say, this is something that they brought up. I think this was passed only in the city of Seattle, or maybe only in the state of Washington. Is now if you are to sue the police for police-involved murder or police brutality, the police would get lawyers, but you would not. But now, because of this new law, you also automatically get a lawyer. It only works, before it only worked for the defendant, but now it's for both sides automatically get a lawyer or an attorney or whatever, which I think is good. Especially in this instance. Obviously, I'm not saying if Jeff Bezos is going to sue someone, he should automatically get a lawyer and he can pay for one. But I mean, in this instances where it's mostly, marginalized communities who can't afford one in the past, and that's been an issue about why they've been losing these court cases. I mean, of the many issues, that it's a good thing. No, but there's that. But the issue behind that is that these are supposed to be free public attorneys for people who have been arrested to defend themselves, but that doesn't happen in a lot of cases because public defense and public defenders and public attorneys, civil lawyers, are very, very hard to come by. They're few and far in between. Therefore, they get overloaded with work because they have to do all of the cases they are assigned. They don't get paid nearly enough, and they usually don't have the time to write out a quality defense, meaning that these people, even though they have a lawyer, are probably going to jail because they just don't have time. It's like when your teacher gives you, every single teacher gives you 5 hours of homework, and now all the homework is done really, really poorly because you had maybe a day to finish, 8 things of 5 hours of homework. It's kind of like that. And then there are other places where it's supposed to be a free lawyer, where they charge you to have a public defender, a public attorney, like Georgia, where they charge you, and which makes it even harder for people, especially, once again, minority groups, where they're already underrepresented and mistreated in the justice system. This doesn't work out for them as well. This perpetuates the prison system that we have by just putting people away, without really adequately looking at, should they be in jail? Was racial bias involved? Was classism involved? We don't know. Speaking of that, let's go segue into jury of unbiased peers, because this is impossible to provide, this is impossible to guarantee, and even when it is guaranteed, it has never actually been done. At least not, once again, for minority groups, because everybody has biases. I think that's the one thing that we have learned, from all of this, information that we have learned, that everybody has biases, whether it's for something, against something, explicit, implicit, whether you acknowledge that you favor this one type of person over this other, or whether you explicitly say, well, I hate this person, but I like this person. Everybody has biases. There is no such thing as a jury of unbiased peers, because we all have those unconscious biases that we're working for, and there's no way to really determine if someone doesn't or not. And another reason is that we have never used a jury of unbiased peers in minority court cases. If you look back at any of the wrongful arrests or many of the death sentences you put on black men or children, it's because, we've had a jury of unbiased peers, for a black man who supposedly raped a white woman, and all of the jurors are white, you know? But you never see, for a white rapist, an entire jury of black peers. No, it's always been people who avidly have prejudices against these communities. Because there's no such thing as a jury of biased peers, there's no unbiased person. That's not something that we can guarantee. It's not even something we've tried to guarantee. If we're having people who actively hate this person because of something that has nothing to do with the actual case at hand, that's not even attempting to give them a choice of unbiased peers. And another thing is that we don't really take court cases that seriously in America. We always have, you have to go in for jury duty. But jury duty is making sure that this court case, that justice is served. It's taking it out of maybe the corrupt system and putting it into your hands and making you responsible for, whether this person is guilty or not. And a lot of people, pass that up or try to get out of it when it is now like your civil duty to try and, make this justice system as fair as possible, And I feel like we don't think about that enough. Like if we see it as a burden, but really it should be taken as seriously as voting is in America. To understand what kind of process is happening and understand, how we are affected by this and how it plays into this. Because the only person you can really count on to be fair is if you believe you're being fair. And as for, knowing what you're being charged with and knowing the evidence, that I can't really say anything negatively against, except that because our brains are so wired to believe anything, we're so, impressionable. Studies have been done where it's like, we can convince people that they've done things that they've never done, down to great detail. So there really is, like witness evidence is really not as sound as we say it is, because people, have poor memory, or people can be easily convinced of one thing that people lie, and we can't always tell that they're lying. And it's just, there's a lot wrong with our justice system, and it's especially really wrong at a court level justice system. And watching the Derek Chauvin trials says a lot that even though we have all these witnesses who said they saw all of these things, all these video of all of these things, the judge is still obviously heavily biased towards letting Derek Chauvin off, with a very light sentence. Saying, well, out of all of these other times, 8 other times he's done something like this, even like kneeling on the neck of a child, we will only let you bring in 2. Even though there's had a long track history of police brutality, you only have to bring in 2 cases of this. Or talking about how, well, maybe he had drugs in his system and that's what killed him, when it shouldn't be about what killed him or not. The fact is that Derek should not have been on the man's neck. But no one's thinking about that. It's well, did he actually kill the guy? If the answer is no, he didn't actually kill the guy, then they're going to let him off. Whether it was ethical for him to kneel on George Floyd's neck or not, they're going to let him go because he technically would not have been responsible for the death. And that is a load of BS because we're prioritizing the wrong thing. The fact isn't that George Floyd is dead, but that's a big issue, is that he did die from what was done, whether there were drugs in the system or not. That kind of pressure would have killed him. The fact is that Derek Chauvin should not have been kneeling on his neck as a way to restrain him. Someone who wasn't fighting back, who wasn't an avid threat. And even if, he was an avid threat, that's not how you kneel on someone. If you do have to kneel on someone, which you never should, but if you did have to, why was his back not enough? Why on his neck? And it's like, I've gone on a tangent here, because the Sixth Amendment really is just kind of a load of bullshit, and the more we look at it in America, It's like we've made this promise, but we can't keep it ourselves. That's a lot of things about our amendments and about our Constitution, is that we make all these promises and all these laws, and we never actually keep them, because the federal government's like, well, they don't apply to us, and so many people have been going up like, well, they don't apply to us, but we really need to look at these laws and see how we're applying them, and if that's fair, or if it's time to, like, maybe take these laws out or change these laws, or maybe looking to see how or why you're enforcing them incorrectly. What effect that's had on the rest of the system it's a part of, because the justice system and the prison system are hugely flawed systems in America, and the fact that we arrest enough people to largely sway an election is very, very concerning, especially when they're majority and minority groups. It's concerning, and it's scary to think about that something that's so crucial and important to society, any society, not just American or Western society, could go so wrong. It's terrifying to think about whether you are a minority or not. Anyway, thanks for letting me ramble. I think this is more a little bit lighthearted, more so than the last video, which I apologize for. I didn't mean for it to get that depressed, but sometimes you just have to real talk, and I was really not having a good week last week. So thank you for your patience, thank you for your time so long, and thanks for all the fish, and be excellent to each other, and party on, dudes.